Hello, and welcome to our Cerenade video. In this video, we will go over the enhancements made to Timekeeper. With the update, we added a separate time entries tab on both the client and case profile. By having a separate time entry section, the profiles can now track total time spent on a client or case profile. Additionally, you can now send a time entry to the time entry area and simultaneously generate an expense. Previously, you would only be able to do one or the other. Before we begin, it is important to note that in order to use this feature, you must be signed up to the Timekeeper optional module. Also, if you want to generate expenses, you must be signed up to billing. Let us log into the caseworker portal. Let us click on the Timekeeper and start a time. We will click on Start Timed Entry. A clock will start. You can edit the description to help you identify this time when you come back to this screen. And you can now navigate away from the screen, and the clock will continue. Once you are done, you will come back to this Timekeeper area. You will now click on the Pause button. You will then click on the Move To button. You will see two options. You can move it to the client profile or case profile. If choosing case profile, it will ask you to search for the case. You will also see a checkbox to create an expense. If selecting it, just like it states, it will send this to be an expense as well. If you click the Move button, it will send the time entry to the case profile, and it will prompt the ability to create the expense. You can select from your default time expenses here, and once selecting the expense, finalize by clicking Finish to stay on the screen, or Finish and navigate to Case Time Entries to go into the new time entries area of the case profile. Your timed entry and expense have now been created. If we had unchecked the box to create an expense, meaning you only want to send this as a time entry, you will be asked to only search for the case. You can proceed to either selecting Move, which sends it to the time entry area and leaving you in the Timekeeper section, or you can select Move and navigate to Case Time Entries, and it will take you into the new time entries area of the case profile. This new time entries area will only store time entries, meaning it is no longer a part of the log section, where you can now view the overall time spent on this case, as well as individual times that contributed to it. And with this, you can generate a custom report based on the information here, if you are signed up to that optional module. Also, with these timed entries, if you forgot to create an expense and would like to, no worries, there's a button to generate the expense afterwards. By clicking the Create Expense button, you can modify the times, select the expense, and once finished you can click on Finish to stay on the screen, or Finish and navigate to Expenses. Your Expenses tab of the case profile will now show the expense you just created, and you can proceed to create an invoice based on these expenses. If we want to send a timed entry to a client profile, it works similarly. If we start a new timed entry, and this time we send it to the client profile, just like it states, it will send it to the time entry area of the client profile, where you can view the info, build reports, and more. Something to note, however, is if you send a timed entry to the client profile as opposed to the case profile, there is no Create an Expense button like we saw in the case profile. You would have to manually add the expense in the case profile at a later point. Lastly, by default, you can only start a timed entry, but cannot modify those time entries. If you would like to manually create a time entry or be able to modify a timed entry, you can give yourself permissions in the admin tools. To go into the admin tools, click on the settings icon on the top right and proceed to click on Administrative Tools. From the admin tools, click on Users. You will then click on the Edit button next to a user's profile. Once inside the user's profile, scroll down to the Access Rights. You will find a checkbox allowing you to manually create timed entries and one to be able to update timed entries. If checking the box that allows you to create a timed entry, you will see a new box appear when going to the Timekeeper function titled Create Timed Entry. By clicking this, you can manually create a time entry where rather than an ongoing clock tracking time, you can manually add the time in the format shown, hours, minutes, and seconds. Once applying your time, you will save it, and it will now reflect the time you just created. From here, you can either start the clock and begin at the time you created, or send it to the time entries area of the client or case profile as we previously saw. Now, if we go back to the admin and check the box that allows us to update a Timekeeper entry, this will allow us to modify timed entries located in the Timekeeper area. This means, let's say you forgot to pause the clock and it now shows a time that is not accurate. By enabling the update box on the admin, I can go into a time entry and modify it by clicking the edit button. I will now be able to modify the time of any time entry you see here. When applying these settings in admin, make sure to click on save up top to finalize the permissions for the timekeeper, and please note this is a user setting that is specific to a caseworker. Proceed with giving permissions to whoever you'd like to be able to create and modify timed entries. This concludes our video on the update to Timekeeper.